So Amnesty International is reporting on some grim news here. Saudi Arabia, 37 people were put to death in a shocking execution spree. The execution of 37 people convicted on terrorism charges marks an alarming escalation in Saudi Arabia's use of the death penalty, said Amnesty International today. Among those put to death was a young man who was convicted of a crime that took place while he was under the age of 18. Today's mass execution is a chilling demonstration of the Saudi Arabian authorities' callous disregard for human life. It is also yet another gruesome indication of how the death penalty is being used as a political tool to crush dissent from within the country's Shia minority, said Lynn Malouf, Middle East Research Director at Amnesty International. The majority of those executed were Shia men who were convicted after sham trials that violated international fair trial standards, which relied on confessions extracted through torture. They include 11 men who were convicted of spying for Iran and sentenced to death after a grossly unfair trial. At least 14 others executed were convicted of violent offenses related to their participation in anti-government demonstrations in Saudi Arabia's Shia-majority eastern province between 2011 and 2012. The 14 men were subjected to prolonged pretrial detention and told the court that they were tortured or otherwise ill-treated during their interrogation in order to have confessions extracted from them. Also among those executed is Abdul Karim al-Hawaj, a young Shia man who was arrested at the age of 16 and convicted of offenses related to his involvement in anti-government protests. Under international law, the use of the death penalty against people who were under the age of 18 at the time of the crime is strictly prohibited. Amnesty International understands that the families were not informed about the executions in advance and were shocked to learn of the news. So, listen, you would hear much more about this if it was a U.S. enemy. But since it's a U.S. ally, it's kind of buried. The news is kind of buried. And let's not mince words here. Saudi Arabia is basically killing people for protesting the government. And unfortunately, this should come as no surprise because they put to death and sentenced to death a bunch of women's rights activists who were just asking for the ability to drive. And what did they do? They said, the government said, oh, we are now going to let women drive. And then they turn around and try to put to death, and are putting to death, women who fought for the right to drive. Now, wait, if you agree with them and you're allowing that to be the case, then why would you put them to death? I'll tell you why. Because they're authoritarian. When you're authoritarian, you don't tolerate dissent. When there is dissent, you punish it as strictly as possible so that there won't be dissent in the future, and you can get away with doing whatever the fuck you want to do. So this is the place we're at right now, man. This is what's happening. 37 people put to death. Mostly these people are put to death because they're protesting the government and because they're Shia. And of course, Saudi Arabia is a fundamentalist Sunni government, and they're viciously oppressive against Shias. So this is disgusting. And hilariously, they're on the UN Human Rights Council. They're on the UN Human Rights Council, and they're putting people to death for protesting. So do me a favor, US. Never, ever, 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 ever give me that bullshit line about, we're doing what we're doing around the world to protect freedom and democracy. If you care about freedom, if you care about democracy, you would immediately try to stop your ally from executing people for fucking protesting, but you're not going to do that. And in fact, what you're going to do is keep giving them weapons, keep giving them money, and keep aiding their genocide in Saudi Arabia, because you don't care about freedom, you don't care about democracy, you don't care about human rights. All you care about is who's on your team and expanding your power and influence. So we act like every empire has ever acted throughout human history. It's not about doing the right thing or being above it all or holding people to a standard. No. It's about cynically weaponizing those arguments to use against our political enemies so that they fall in line and do the bidding of our government and our corporations.